Welcome to the Slate Opinion Page podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Scalia, the opinion page editor of the Slate, and this is part 2 of our series discussing AI and its impact on our future work. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jamon Campbell, professor of psychology at Shippensburg University, who's joining us to talk about AI's impacts on mental health. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Campbell.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, there is a shortage of mental health professionals, and healthcare providers are always looking to cut costs. Do you think there will be attempts to make AI therapy an endorsed mainstream concept?
So that's a good question. I don't think there's going to be attempts by psychologists per se. I think AI in psychology is used more as a tool, but that doesn't mean other outside agencies and companies aren't going to try and make money on the technology by saying, hey, this is an alternative to psychologist, or this could be something that supplements therapy. And I think that's a lot what we're seeing. We also see people, I think on their own, maybe being more comfortable talking to like an AI chatbot or something like that. And so they might be more comfortable sharing and opening up because it's, anonymous and it's non-judgmental and there's not the insurance cost and things like that. So there's, it's kind of easy to open up to these tools and technology. But from a psychologist perspective, it wouldn't be something that would be recommended or endorsed by any of our kind of organizations or agencies. Other than, like I said, using it as a tool to facilitate and help maybe fill in some of the gaps. I think that's where we're going to see the utility. Also in education, using it as part of our training programs in psychology as well.
So that's very interesting. How do you think it could be used to help train? Do you think, so I know medical boards, they used to have actors like portray patients. Do you think that these bots could be trained to resemble a patient with mental health issues, and that a young prospective student could have to train on that, have to try and diagnose it? Is that what you think it could be used for? Or are you thinking about how AI is just like a study aid?
No, absolutely. In terms of the training, that's already being done. That's being done in graduate schools. That's being done at the undergraduate level. We do some of it here, actually.
Having chatbots simulate the patient experience.
Yeah. So we do these role plays in some of our classes. It's something we're kind of rolling out slowly, gradually here. We just had a meeting about it, and we're talking about some of the strategies to use this. But normally we have students doing role plays with each other. So as a student now, you're supposed to pretend to be someone, having, say, a manic episode or something like that. And then the other student, his job is to try and diagnose it. Well, oftentimes being able to diagnose it depends on how good the person is in terms of acting out those scenarios. Well, a chatbot is going to be able to do that in a somewhat more sophisticated way, because you can input, I want you to act in specifically this, or you can feed it in scripts and dialogues and say, this is an actual transcript of someone who's experiencing a manic episode. And you can have dozens and dozens of those inputted into the chatbot. And so when they are then demonstrating that episode, it's going to be a much more natural sounding, much more realistic, because they've been trained on actual models. It's not an undergraduate who's pretending essentially to have these symptoms that they may not fully understand. So those are some of the ways that you see it being used. Also, you can reverse it. The person who's doing the diagnosis, you have them, interact with a chatbot, and now they are trying to, practice their clinical skills or practice their counseling skills. And so how would you respond to a person who says this to you? Or how would you respond to a person who's acting in such a way, if we're trying to teach them a particular therapeutic model? Okay, based on that model, what would you say to this person? How would you reflect on what this person is saying? And then, the chatbot and the therapist can, after that interaction, basically go back and say, okay, this is what you did good. Here's what you need some improvement on. This model, this therapeutic model would suggest in this case, you might want to say this or you might want to say that. And so we've had some students practicing with those types of interactions. And like I said, in terms of training the therapist to detect and understand certain disorders, and also to work on their therapeutic skills. Yeah, there's actually programs that you can buy, software packages that you can buy that already have kind of these models that have been trained. And like I said, they're being used in graduate programs, and we're going to see more and more of that.
That is fascinating, and I wasn't even aware that it was being done already.
Oh, yeah.
But do you think that, the financial benefits of these major healthcare conglomerates are too big to ignore?
Yeah.
And do you see them, hey, we can train them to be an accurate patient? Do you think that they could try and train these chatbots on all of the psychological theories, all of the textbooks, the DS9 or whatever, which edition we're up to? I can't remember.
DSM-5. Yeah.
Do you think that they could make a more psychologically sound version of these chatbots? Because people, as we'll get into, people are confiding in them anyway.
Yeah. I think there are definitely going to be companies who see a market for that we can have our own, branded therapist out there that can, go from one, therapeutic technique to another, can automatically choose which best fits, can do this quicker and faster and easier than and cheaper, as you were saying, than a human therapist. I'm sure there are going to be companies, like I said, that are going to be trying to do those types of things. I don't think there's very many psychologists who would say that that's a good idea. You have to have, the guardrails on. You have to have someone supervising, reviewing. As we know, just because you're training these bots on these models doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stick to it. AI chatbots have done things like, had hallucinations and delusions, as we call them, where they start creating their own ideas that are loosely based on, some of the theories and models, but they just kind of go off the rail and they'll make up things. And what you wouldn't want to see is some chatbot making up some therapeutic technique or some diagnosis that doesn't even really fit or isn't an actually recognized diagnosis or treatment plan. They have to be careful supervision. It has to be, you have to, when a therapist goes through and they have a therapy session, they'll oftentimes go through and, review their case notes. And then if they're still, under supervision, their supervisor will come through and then double check those progress notes to make sure, okay, here's what I'm seeing, here's what you did. Yeah, that seems good. Let's think about this. With just a random chatbot program out there, giving out advice, unfiltered and unsupervised, that's extremely dangerous. And like I said, most psychologists would not be on board for that.
Yeah, and understandably so, but unfortunately, it's a bit of what we do have going on right now, and they're not even built for it. We have regular consumer-grade chat GPT, chat bots that are, made for answering questions about history, philosophy, explaining social media post or trends to you. And it's coming up with the disastrous results. So we have a couple cases of it. But one of the big ones that came was a Wall Street Journal story that came out in August about a man named Eric Solberg who he had pre-existing mental health problems. He starts confiding in ChatGPT about, hey, he's living with his mother. He thinks that she's poisoning him, that her and her friend are poisoning him through the car air vents. ChatGPT agrees. There's definitely a case for that. The chat logs represented, according to that story. That it found that he uploaded a copy of his Chinese food delivery receipt, and it told him that there's definitely a cipher in this, that the definite possibility exists. And so how much of a problem do you think we have right now with them? Because for all of the cases that pop up for people that had confided in it to disastrous results, chances are we have a lot of people who we don't know about doing it. There's probably, I'd say, hundreds of thousands, if not a million people who may already be doing this.
Yeah, and I don't know, a number, and I don't know how many, what percent would be giving, bad information or harmful information. But even one case is scary and should give us some pause here. Yeah, when you talk about the freely available online chatbots, ChatGPT being the most prevalent, the most famous one. Yeah, I mean, anyone could go on and say, hey, I need a therapist. Can you diagnose me, or can you do that? And it'll do what you tell it. You can say, I want you to act like a therapist who has this perspective, and can you help me out here? And it will respond based on the information that it has been trained on, and based on the information that you give it. And sometimes, yeah, there are some scary results that come out in terms of ChatGPT, where the case I remember, I think it was probably a year or two ago, was some parents found kids interacting with the chatbot, and it was actually encouraging things like suicide ideation and some of those extreme types of behaviors that you would never see from a trained therapist in most cases. So yeah, you got to be careful. I mean, those aren't, just ChatGPT is not anything that you should necessarily be turning to for mental health, for therapeutic purposes. Maybe for advice, like we do WebMD, but we know how disastrous that can be. Every time you search on anything, a joint pain, you automatically just worst case scenario pops up. It's similar to that, right? It's a tool, but ChatGPT is different because it does have a voice. It can have a personality. We can, have a tendency to forget that this is just a program that's using predictive modeling based on what it's been trained on, and that it should not be a substitute for a real therapist or a real doctor, a mental health provider, a parent, a mentor, those types of things. But for people who are experiencing mental health crisis, for kids who are just naive, there is a risk there, and I think there needs to be some safeguards. And I think the companies have taken some of these incidents to heart, and have gone back in and in the programming tried to put on more of those safeguards. But yeah, I think this technology got rolled out a little too fast, a little too quick. Without those guardrails being in place.
Well, people rebelled. So after the Solberg case, and there's been cases before. Last year, a 14-year-old did unfortunately commit suicide after confiding in the ChatGPT, and that's probably the story that you were alluding to. But people rebelled, and they took it away when they took it away, and they re-released it, but for the paying customer now, so the paying customer can have it back.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned before about the personality. They're giving these bots names. So Solberg named his Barry, and I should of course mention that this is still an ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
But Solberg named his Barry. You have Grok by XAI, Elon Musk's company. It has full avatars, anime-based avatars. Do you think that this is going to be much bigger of a problem? Do you think the human mind, especially kind of maybe a lonely or depressed mind, can handle the fact that we're giving them these personalities? We didn't really evolve to be able to process interacting with non-living organisms.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's always going to be people who are more vulnerable to abuse or misuse technology, right? I think, even with, just social media, there's a lot of talk about the dangers of social media to teens and things like that. And a lot of that has been a little bit overblown because, again, we're are there risks out there? Absolutely. But it's usually a subgroup of people who are more at risk than others, right? You usually see more benefits from the technology, but there are those, that are more vulnerable, people who are extremely lonely, people who are socially anxious, people who are depressed, who don't have a lot of, I guess, face-to-face contact or real-world strong social networks, friends and family that they can turn to as well. People who are more isolated might tend to rely on the technology too much and not have those other people in their lives who are checking on them. And so, yeah, naming, a bot, giving it a particular personality that best fits you. Yeah, those individuals might have a tendency to rely more heavily on that technology, to use it more, to trust it more than others. And again, I think these are evolving conversations that the companies themselves need to have, that parents need to be aware of, that family members need to be aware of when people are using this technology, like lots of other technologies that have come before it.
Yeah, so that's the thing. People have a hard time trusting. They have a hard time going to the doctor and admitting certain problems. And this is something that'll never judge them. So
Sure.
Can real therapists compete with that? Because the allure of it's great. There's this thing, it's never going to judge me. It's never going to get tired of talking to me. It's not going to go home to its wife or husband and say, hey, you would not believe this guy I had in my office today. And it also has kind of a syncopacy problem. So it likes to tell you what you want to hear. And it kind of flies in the face of behavioral methods like the cognitive behavioral method by kind of just telling you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
How can therapy compete with that allure that it's kind of irresistible to somebody who wants help and is embarrassed by it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, therapists have been struggling with that for decades now, right? Kind of destigmatizing mental health. I think we've made some good progress.
Oh, to be sure.
I think talking about it more, normalizing the struggle, especially in certain populations, and men, for instance, who have, kind of just that cultural norm to hold everything in and not show any vulnerability. I think we've come a long way, and I think we still have a long way to go as well to get rid of some of that shame or that guilt or that stigma that people might feel. But in that same vein, I mean, this might be, it could easily become a stepping stone as well. If you get used to opening up and sharing to the chatbot, that might then translate into real world benefits as well. So I'm comfortable sharing and talking about this in this kind of safe space. And so next time, I having a conversation with my partner or one of my friends, because I've opened up so much already, I might be more likely to open up to them as well, and I might be more able to share with an actual trained therapist because I've kind of practiced in this safe space. That's where I see kind of the real benefit. Again, will that happen for everyone? No, I think there are some people who might just become too comfortable with that interaction. But I don't necessarily know that that's going to be the norm overall, or at least that's my hope, because we've seen this kind of in the past. People who are lonely and socially anxious, when they find like friend groups online that they connect with. So say I'm just not comfortable talking face to face, and I don't have a lot of real world friends. But online, behind an avatar and a name, I have lots of friends, and we connect and we share lots of things, and we talk, and then eventually we decide, okay, well, let's meet, in the real world. We're all heading to this place, or let's meet up here. And because I've established that foundation online, it enables me to make that transition more easily. And now we're interacting face to face, and I see the benefits of that as well. And so that online then again becomes a tool. It's a tool that I can use to help me gain some real world benefits.
So do you think, on balance, this has the ability to do more good than it does harm? Do you think that there's a path to a better future?
Yeah, that's my hope. I don't have, I think, as much fear of AI and chatbots and things like that as some people do, because we've come across this these revolutionary technologies before in the past, right? I mean, you can go back to like, the radio and the television and the internet as a whole. And those, we always have kind of this, oh my God, it's going to change, everything for the worse. And it's going to damage the kids and our privacy is gone. And it's going, from TV, we're going to start getting, subliminal communist messages and it's going to be directly beamed into our home. And that was a legitimate fear for, lots of people. Yeah, I think there's always that fear of new technology that's kind of thrust upon us a little too quick. I think eventually we figure it out. I think eventually, society as a whole, if this is going to be a part of our daily lives, we have to come to some sort of, agreement to how we're going to use it, when it's appropriate, what it's used for, what it's not used for. I think we're seeing that in education now. We're kind of in that kind of gray area where kids are still uncertain about what they're allowed to do in the classroom with AI and teachers are uncertain. But I think we're starting to navigate it and come up with those norms and strategies. I think it's going to be another one of those kind of interesting tools that, pretty soon we have it figured out. We know that there's some problems. We know what to look for. But that's my hope.
It's my hope too. I always hope that it can be, that we'll grow for the better and not the worse. Yeah. So seems as good a place as any to end it. So thank you for joining us in this conversation.
Thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed it.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.